All right, we are. Let's see here. Yeah, we are live on Facebook, Jalen. Now we're
Awesome.
gonna go. Now I'm gonna try to get us to go live here on Instagram. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Looks like I'm frozen. All right.
On here. Can you
Hold
hear
on.
me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Hold on. Let me
Good.
try Instagram again.
Cool.
I feel like an idiot when I do these things, dude. All right, here we go. All right, I'm live, bro. We're live on Facebook and we are live on Instagram. Do you see me on the Eastown site where you can join in? All right, I see you. You waved to me. Don't wave at me. Join me. Let's see here. I see you. You join. Now I just need. Yep, there we go. All right, with Jalen. All right, let's see here. Here we go. All right, Jalen, how you doing, buddy?
Doing good. I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing really good. We're managed to go live on Facebook, on Zoom, and we've managed to go live on Instagram, which is huge. Okay, this is a big deal.
Yes, it is.
Hey, man, tell me a little bit. We've never actually met in person. First of all, I want to say you led our worship this past Sunday at Eastown, and buddy, you did an amazing job. So I just want to say thank you for that.
Oh wow, and thank you. I mean, thanks for that opportunity. I mean, I had a great time putting that together. Yeah, it's just awesome. I think that's the first time I've interacted with Easttown.
Yeah, you did good. In fact, a lot of people commented. I don't know if you saw this, but how we dress very similar. Um,
Yes, we definitely do. Right.
yeah, and you've taken my lead on style, so I think you're doing a great job. I think it was really good. Hey, dude, I'll tell you. So you're at Kensington Church. I was at Kensington for 10 years. They're one of our partner churches.
Wow.
Helped us get launched out here in the Bay Area. What's that been like, man? How's that going?
Man, it's been beautiful. I mean, I've been there now for 3 years. Yeah, it's 3 years this month. And so, I mean, at the Troy campus is where I'm at. And I mean, it's just been a beautiful experience being there, working under Danny Cox and his leadership there at the Troy campus. And it's been awesome. It really has. It's a different like environment, than what I grew up in. So there was a learning curve, but it's a beautiful experience so far.
Yeah. You literally came in like a couple of months after we had just left, my wife and I and
Oh,
our
wow.
four kids. And you probably felt that huge hole there at Kensington with my absence. Is that something that you can vouch for?
Yes, yes. I mean, it was hard for us to get in there. It seemed like a wasteland at first, without Clint. And
Ah, that's good. So talk to me a little bit about, I know a little of your backstory, where you grew up, and then there was a move in your life, a major move. So talk a little bit about that.
yes, so I grew up in Pontiac. My dad is from Pontiac. My mom's from Detroit. My dad basically grew up in poverty and in a rough situation. Moved from Montgomery, Alabama, when he was really young. Uh, and then my mom, completely different. She actually came from a little bit of money. Her parents were pretty successful. And so they met through church. Their churches that they went to, they were affiliated with each other. And then so they started a family, and I'm the firstborn. I got married and started a family. And then they lived in Pontiac. And my dad was the minister of music at a church in Pontiac. And it was the same church that he came to Christ in when he was 17, and now the same church he's pastoring. And so,
Hey, Jalen, give me a little background for people that don't know what Pontiac is like.
yeah,
What is that like?
Pontiac it's a city right outside of Detroit, probably about 20 minutes away, north of Detroit. Largely Black community, inner city community. There are areas of it that are better than others, but it's a city that has really struggled, especially within the past decade and a half or so. So I would say that Pontiac is a place. It's like a little Detroit for those who aren't familiar with Michigan. That's what I could say about it.
Yeah. And so you grew up in a predominantly Black culture in Pontiac. And then a move, like your dad, how did you guys move? Like, what was that like? Your dad comes home one day and says, "Hey, we're moving. I'm taking you out of your school." What was that? And where did you move to?
So my dad is he runs the juvenile probation department in Oakland County. He works along with some school systems in there, and at the time he was heavily involved in Pontiac. And so for multiple reasons, my parents decided to move. One is because they wanted to move into another home. Two is they wanted better school systems for us kids, and then three was my dad didn't want us going to school in the same schools where his clients were. So we moved to Oxford, Michigan, which is vastly different than Pontiac. Pontiac largely Black, Oxford largely white. Actually, when I got to the school, I think there was only a handful of Black kids in a very, very large school. I think there was like 6 or 7 of us. And I think the number of kids in the school was like 1,200, a little over 1,200. Yeah, so it was a mostly farm town community with new development happening in certain areas, and my parents, chose to build a house out there.
So you moved to Oxford. You're one of 6 Black kids in an all-white high school. What was that? What was that experience like for you?
And as a kid coming from a largely Black community, it was hard to understand at first, like what was happening. But it was quite an experience. It was a lot of subtlety. I mean, there was some straight in your face racism as well that took place. I mean, the N word was used very frequently there towards me, towards a lot of the other Black kids as well. There were situations with, police, and I know that's a tough thing to talk about right now, but there were, and that's just my honest experience. There were interesting situations with some teachers as well. And so it was a tough time to transition as a kid in high school, So, yeah.
Were you angry? Were you angry at your dad for that move? Like, was that something? I mean, you leave everything that you know. What was that like? What was that relationship between you and your dad?
Man, it was a rocky road, man. I did not. I wasn't a big fan of my parents at that time, and a lot of the ways that I acted out was through. At first, get upset and just try to take matters in my own hands as a kid. Didn't really understand how to do that.
You experienced, that was kind of your upbringing, your experience. And did you move like as a freshman, or like, was that middle of high school, or what was that?
It was actually summer of 8th grade, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah.
Summer. So I did.
Yeah. So let's jump forward a little bit. So you have family now, right? You're 28 years old. And tell me a little bit about your family.
Family. I got me and my wife. We got married. This is 5 years in August, and we've got 2 little girls, Carrington and Cadence. Carrington is 2; she'll be 3 in September. Cadence is 1, and they'll be 2 in December. So they're 15 months apart. That wasn't the plan, but that's what happened.
Hey, man, they're perfect though, right? I've seen them on Facebook. Like, they've got to be the most perfect children ever.
Yeah, they're perfect in what I post on Facebook.
So you guys, you're at Kensington Church. So what's it like been leading in a white suburban church environment? What's that been like for you?
Yeah, I think my childhood or my high school years, things like that, prepared me for it. The thing was, I mean, here's like a 100% honesty. I come from a church background where, I mean, you're talking B3 organ, large choirs, and all kind of. I mean, church started at 11:30, and we got done at probably 3:30. We go home, have dinner, and come back at 7 o'clock, and we'd have night service. If there wasn't a 4 o'clock service that happened first, and then we had night service at 7 o'clock. And so I came to Kensington, and the services are like 60 to 65 minutes, and I'm like, has the Holy Spirit moved yet?
Hey, bro.
You know, no.
Hey,
So like,
I remember there were meetings if the service went over 60 minutes, like somebody's head's gonna roll. Hey,
yeah, man.
let's cut it.
Yeah, so I mean, that's the thing is like, so for me, there was a huge cultural change just in the way we did services. And I mean, in a lot of traditional African American churches, there's, you know, super cliche language, you know. And so for me, I realized slowly but surely that that language does not work in a largely suburban white community. Like, you know, can I get an amen is sometimes accepted, you know, so but it's been fun. It's taught me a lot. It's taught me a whole lot, navigating the cultural differences. But in this season, right now, there has been another added level of stress being a Black male in a largely white community. I mean, I feel extremely loved by the community and supported and valued, and I mean, I wouldn't trade it for the world. But navigating these kinds of conversations, knowing that my skin color is politicized, knowing that a lot of my experiences are politicized as well, it makes it difficult. It makes it a bit difficult.
Can you talk about that a little bit about your experiences being politicized? Like what is that? I mean, help me learn what that means and what that looks like.
Yeah. So right now, what I've noticed most is that like a lot of the Black experience is now being associated with leftism, you know, and so I've been in many situations where people have automatically assumed what I believe based on my skin color, and assumed exactly where I stand in politics or whatever else based on my skin color. And there was actually something interesting that I did on purpose. So I've had a string of Facebook posts that I've posted within the past couple of months, and I purposely never used BLM as a hashtag, or I never said anything about it. Right now, I believe that that is a statement that has been politicized by both sides, you know. But I purposely didn't use it, and about 2 months in, uh, for the people that were upset with what I was posting, 99% of them accused me of standing for the Black Lives Matter movement. And so
Wow.
automatically right there shows you that like I intentionally did not post anything about it, right? Or reference it. But based on what I was saying and the color of skin that I have, I was automatically associated with the political movement when you reference Black Lives Matter. So that's what I'm saying. That's been interesting.
Yeah, man, that's incredible. How do you still have a smile on your face?
You know, I think the thing is I realized that, you know, um, battle isn't necessarily won by having a ton of people on your side, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And honestly, I'm not fighting for my side at all, you know? I say often that I believe we'll all get to heaven one day and realize how wrong we all were about everything,
Yeah.
you know? So my side, you know? I value the gospel, and that's what I'm fighting to pursue. And so I don't think that the battle is always won by the swift or the quick or by numbers. And so for me, I really feel that even if there's just a few, that are striving to understand and see how the gospel informs the time that we're in, um, I have a lot of joy in that. I have
Yeah.
a lot of joy in that. Yeah.
Can we go back to something you said? You said about the gospel is like you talked about the one thing that you're holding on to is the gospel. Like this is
Yeah.
the thing that you keep coming back to. I feel like in this season that we're in right now, I feel like the gospel has, I think we both know when we talk about the gospel, we're talking about Jesus. But what for a Black man and what you're doing and what you're leading, when you talk about the gospel and freedom, what define that for us? Because I think I've grown up with this lens, my worldview totally different, what the gospel means to me and freedom means to me. But to my Black friends, the gospel that I'm talking about differs from the gospel that they're talking about, or how they see it or how they view it. Can you talk about that a little bit? I know I didn't put that question on the paper.
No, you're not yet. Yeah. What's interesting is I actually believe largely the Black and white community see the gospel within the same terms: liberation, freedom. I think it's the experience and the lens that changes. So, like for the Black community, like hearing my grandmother talk about what Jesus means to her and how salvation and what the plan of salvation is, there's a lot of things that inform her lens and how she sees the gospel. And so I would say to the Black community at large, it's more about liberation from oppression. So for like slaves back in in the days of slavery, 300-400 years ago, the way Christianity was through freedom from bondage, and not necessarily freedom from bondage in this life, but in the life that is to come. And so what I would say is like that's vastly different than I've noticed the way that my white friends interpret it. So for me, I see freedom through the lens of the way it's been passed down to me. So it's like Jesus came into this world to save me, not only for what is to come, heaven and things like that, but also like freedom from the bondage of the bondages that have been placed in, I would say, even our systems here in America over time. That's the way the civil rights movement happened. I mean, if it wasn't for the African American church, Dr. King, you could wave his movement goodbye, and he said that himself. And so the thing is, it's like the way the African American church rallies around social issues is based on their view and their lens of how they experience the gospel and they experience Jesus.
Wow. Let's do a whole episode just on that. That was really good. No, I appreciate
know, right?
that so much. Here's one of the questions I want to ask you is, what are some of the things, and you've kind of answered this, you kind of threaded it all the way through this, is what are some of the things you think that white Christians might be surprised to learn about the Black experience?
Yeah. I think the thing is like, I think that the white community needs to press into learning and learning past what your history books teach you. I think we need to all lean into understanding the history of our relationship together. And so like our communities have been at odds, for centuries. And so understanding the depth of that is the only way you're going to really be able to pursue real reconciliation. And so that's really my belief about it. And what I've noticed is a lot of my white friends who don't understand the history of our relationship is because they've never had to understand the history of our relationships. So they're fine saying, well, I'm not racist. I don't view people this way. I don't have any bigotry in my heart. My family, I have Black friends. I'm connected to Black people. My aunt adopted a Black girl or things like that. those things allow people to say, well, I don't necessarily need to understand our history together because I'm not part of the problem. And so the thing is what I really believe is the idea that there is a problem and the sense of the way we are interpreting it is mostly portrayed, in my opinion, through media. And so the idea that the problem is something other than reconciliation, other than the heart of Jesus, in my is counterintuitive. You know, it's not really a good idea to healing the problem. And I talked to you about this before. I think viewing the problem in the way that the world views the problem allows us to heal symptoms, but never the disease. Pursuing the heart of Jesus and true reconciliation, which I believe is understanding how the gospel informs both of our lives, right? That is the only way to heal the actual disease, and the symptoms will follow.
Let's talk about that, the disease and symptoms. Do you think that most people are focused on the symptoms versus the disease? It's easier, right? It's easier to focus on the symptom, the behavior, versus the value and the belief that's at the heart.
Totally. Because the thing is, it's like a law, a reform, whatever else will heal the symptom, but it'll never heal the heart. What you need is you need people to change. You know, now I'm not saying that laws and reform and things like that aren't useful. And I think history has proven that they have a place. But the thing is it has a place because there needs to be a system in which where people's hearts aren't changed, there needs to be consequence for those actions, which I stand behind. But if you truly want to have a situation where you don't have to worry about the laws and the reform, you have to heal the heart of people. And the only way to do that is through understanding of the heart of Jesus and each other. You know, loving Jesus is knowing him. And I believe loving each other is knowing each other, you know?
Yeah. Man. And I think, you know, and I've been guilty of this too, is just to say, you know, well, Jesus is the answer. And Jesus is like, no, we really need to investigate the heart of Jesus. Because the heart of Jesus, when you really start to figure out, when you do the hard work of figuring out the heart or discovering the heart of Jesus, man, it awakens you to some things that you have left alone in your life, that you've left to drift in your life. And soon we stop using that little phrase or the flippant phrase of, well, it's just Jesus. It's like, no, we need to talk about the heart of the issue, because it does leave it like when we say things like, well, Jesus is the answer and Jesus, it is like, it makes us feel better in the moment, but there's the healing of the disease isn't actually taking place or transpiring in that. Would you agree with that?
100%. I agree with that wholeheartedly. I think the other thing people need to understand is the gospel is never comfortable. So like if all of a sudden you're in a very, very like good place of comfort right now, and it's you and Jesus, he's your homie, and there's there's nothing pushing you or challenging you, I would question how hard you're pursuing the gospel, because there, in my opinion and in my experience, is there's always something and a way in every season that the gospel is peeling back the things of me that are not like Christ, you know? And so for example, is this, I hear a lot of my white friends who tend to disagree with some of the things that I have to say. They'll say things like this: I don't believe God sees color. And so I say, well, I agree with that in part. You know, I believe that, like, just like the flowers of the field, you know, you have daisies and daffodils and sunflowers or whatever else it is. I don't think God necessarily looks down and sees them and says, well, that's, you know, the black one, that's the white one, that's the, you know, and this is what I have to tell you about the black one and the white one or whatever else. But I believe, like, in our human nature, what we love to do is classify and divide. So like, leave it to mankind to say, well, I'm not a fan of daffodils, you know, I'm more of a, you know, a roses kind of person. You know, that's I think that's what we tend to do all the time. And so I think what we need to understand as the church is that is a natural tendency of humankind and what we've done is we've pushed all of ourselves into different corners. And when we're in those corners, we didn't stop there. We kind of built walls to fortify our corners. And then we come out from time to time. And sometimes we might interact with somebody who's not from the part or the corner that we're from. And in the middle of all that, you know, I think in the division and all stuff, I don't think God sees it as, well, that's my corner over here and my corner over here. I think he sees it, as he says in Ephesians 2, as one new humanity. But I think to see and us in our flesh, what's hard for us to understand is that we tend to classify and divide, but that's not the heart that Jesus is calling us to. And so what does that mean? You know, what does that mean for us? And I think what it means is we first need to tear down those walls. I think those are the walls Paul is talking about when he says he calls them dividing walls of hostility. I think we tear down those walls. And once we do that, we have to understand that that's where the work gets excruciatingly hard. Gets really hard.
Yeah, there's an individual responsibility to work.
Yeah.
Right. And then there's a communal piece to that, a corporate piece to that as well. And that's the one, like, I feel like, Jalen, like over the past 2 months, there's been just this in my own life, like just this work of repentance, of learning and listening. What does it look like as followers of Jesus to do a more corporate work, or more, does that make sense? Does that make 100%. Sense?
Yeah.
What does that look like? Because I think there's people that, man, first of all, I'm glad we're not on Facebook or Instagram right now, because I'm just going to say it. But I think one of the things that really bugs me is that people just, their immediate response is to defend themselves, or to defend, well, this is, or politicize it, or I've done this work, or like what you said, I have a Black friend, or we adopted the, blah, blah, blah. It's like, it just doesn't help. It doesn't help the situation. Those are the things that really bother me. But then there's a piece of me that, yeah, I need to have grace for each and every person. But how do we start the work? Like, what does the work piece of it look like together? Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And so, like, I have a challenge, like, for the Black and white community, and so white community first in it all is this. For those who believe that, like, this is all political hype, and this is not the work or the job of the church to step in. There are a lot of people that believe that, the church should not step into social issues. I've heard that multiple times. And so my challenge to them is can you recognize that there is something wrong, and that there's something between the Black and white community at large that is not healed? Whether you blame it on politics, or whether you blame it on media, or whether you blame it on the Black community themselves, can you recognize that there's a divide? If you follow Jesus and you say yes to that question, then there is no. What are you doing to heal the divide? Because choosing to say that it's not your problem is not the way of Christ. And I would challenge you to try to figure out a scripture or some way or something that tells you that Jesus has not called you to step into the divides within the world. And I think that's what Jesus did. He came in and brought peace and unity and healing and reconciliation to the world. And then to the Black community, my challenge is always this, is in the midst of it, if people from the white community are stepping in to work towards healing this divide, and they don't understand it, and they haven't done much work to try to understand it because they haven't had to. The thing that you need to have is grace, 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 patience, 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 and more patience. And so, and that's the thing it's like being easily offended, right, is not the heart of Jesus either. And so what needs to happen is we need to come to the table together, and we need to lay down the things that offend us, and lay down the parts of our lenses that inform us and tell us that people are politicized, and have a true heart-to-heart and invest in relationship with one another. Relationship is much different than charity. And that's what I've been telling a lot of my white friends. Going to the Black community to do a can drive is great. You know, doing a backpack drive is awesome. But then I challenge some other people is how many backpacks did you have in high school? Well, I had one, and it actually took me into college. I don't think the Black community needs another backpack. What they need is somebody to sit down at the table with them, understand them, and pursue true reconciliation and relationship with them. And I think that is the start of the work. And when you start that, it gets hard because there's a lot of things that inform the Black community as there are a lot of things that inform the white community. And those things are majority of the things that divide us. And so it's going to be hard and tough conversations.
Great.
And we're going to constantly have to die to ourselves, you know?
Dude.
Yeah.
I wrote that down. That's money. I think that needs to be your new your nonprofit. We don't need another backpack. That's so good. Hey, I love this, man. This conversation's great. If you had a vision, right, for the future of America, for your girls, what would that look like?
Yeah. I think that Dr. King's words still ring true in a lot of ways. Right? I pray that one day my girls will be able to sit at the table with little white girls, right? And I pray that there's a day that comes where they will be judged by the content of their character and not the color of their skin. And so I think that that judgment looks a lot different than it did in Dr. King's day, as there was segregation and things like that. But now I hope that their skin color is not politicized. I hope that I hope that one day people will long to understand my story and the stories of people that came before me, Black people that came before me as well. So much so that it's not hard for them to grasp my daughter's story. And maybe my daughter's stories will be very similar to a little white girl's story because we share in the same humanity together. My prayer is that we push closer to humanity together, to the one new humanity together. And so that's been my heart. And I believe that what that's going to take is a lot of Americans turning off their televisions and getting off of Facebook, like or dodging the unproductive conversations on Facebook. And pursuing true relationship. Like I think that in this season, it's extremely easy. Like we're having this conversation on Facebook and Instagram, right? But I long for the day where we could sit next to each other and have this conversation, you know. And so I think that is the relationships that I want to see more of within America, but within the church too. The church needs to facilitate more relational things. And I think the church is really good at charity. I think that is a huge heart and part of the church too. But like what I would challenge white churches to do is invite Black communities into your community. And not for the sake of just their pastor coming to speak or just, you know, trying to figure out a way to partner with them, but just for the sake of community. Set up a dinner or something to be had within your lobby or within your kitchen or fellowship area, whatever else to be had with a Black community for the sake of sharing a meal together. Sharing a relationship with each other with no end goal. That's the start. That's what I long for within the church and within America.
Man, that's so good. Your roots came out there a little bit. You might have to describe what a fellowship place is, like a, you know, where there's food and a fellowship hall.
Yeah.
Buddy, I grew up in North Carolina, so I know what a fellowship hall is, where we have fellowship. Hey man, I wish we could spend more time. I love, like I've been watching and listening from a distance. You led something that was pretty significant. I don't know if it was last week or 2 weeks ago, but it was a prayerful march. Is that how you would describe it? And talk to me a little bit about that, why you did it, what that experience was like, what your hope was for that.
Yeah. My thing is I wanted to figure out what I could do within the midst of this season. And there have been so many protests going on and so many other marches and things like that taking place. But relatively, at least in the Metro Detroit area, churches have been particularly silent. Now, some of them have joined in some other things that have happened, but there hadn't been anything that, I had seen at least where there had been churches that came together for the sake of the gospel that, we're talking about. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to promote an opportunity for there to be a community between suburban churches and urban churches. And one thing is I'm connected to a lot of urban churches from my past, as from my musicianship and past experiences and what I grew up in. And I'm connected to a lot of suburban churches through Kensington, through also other things that I'd done playing piano other places. And I said, how can I leverage my relationships with both types of communities and bring them together for the sake of the gospel? And one thing that I think is important in this time is prayer. And I think if we can bring the communities together to pray for and agree on three things, which is reconciliation, justice, and unity, I believe all are close to God's heart. And one is an attribute of who he is. He is just, I think if we can all come together, politics aside, what we believe or disagree on aside, and say we want to pursue these three things together, I think there's something beautiful that can come out of that. And so I brought that together. It was over 30 churches involved where we did just that. We came together and actually, we planned it on the holiday weekend because of COVID, and we didn't necessarily want that many people to show up. Having 30 churches and their congregations invited, and the city of Troy, where we hosted it, was a little more, receptive of it happening on a less populated weekend. But still, close to over 500 people showed up.
Wow.
And so socially distanced, of course, and everyone, wore masks. And I know that's another political conversation. I'm not trying to talk about masks, but I'm saying they wore. And we prayed together and we walked together. We walked and we prayed together, and it was a beautiful, beautiful opportunity.
That's great.
Yeah.
What are you listening to and reading right now, and what would you recommend?
Yeah. One of the things is that I've really been sticking close to lately is one of the teachers, we talked about him a little earlier, is Albert Tate. And I jump in at least 2-3 times a week. And he's very challenging. What he has to say is challenging, but it's very informing, and it is gospel centered in my opinion. So he's a person that I've really been sticking close to and listening to lately. And as far as like material that I've been reading and stuff like that is honestly that I've been really mulling through Ephesians 2 and 3. Like I've taken this season to say, you know what, there are tons of books I could read, and there are great ones out there. But right now, like I've been reading and focusing in Ephesians 2 and 3, and then calling and having conversations with pastors to what they believe the scripture is saying and how they're interpreting it. And those have been some beautiful conversations. Now there are documentaries and things like that I've watched as well. Like I've watched 13th, and I think that is a beautiful. It's very hard to stomach, but and then also I've been just literally investing and diving into American history. I mean, understanding the last 400 years, why we are where we are. And I think all of us can benefit from that. If you have an opinion about where we are right now and you haven't done any work to understand where we come from, I think your opinion might be less informed than it should be.
Yeah. Yeah. I was talking to my friend, Corey Leak, a couple of days ago, and he had somebody, on his thread after he did a Facebook Live or, interview, and somebody was giving their opinion about White Fragility, an incredible book. If you haven't read this, like anybody who's listening, if you haven't read this book yet, especially if you're white, read this book. But he was saying how somebody was knocking the book, and he simply asked, he goes, "Have you read the book?" And the guy goes, "I don't need to." And he was like, yeah, it's so, I love that what you just said about American history. Like, we start there, and get educated about some of these things, not to have an opinion, but just to know, right? To be in the know of some of those. Jalen, no joke, bro. Like, we're gonna do this. We're gonna do this again. This is absolutely incredible. I can't wait to have you here in person to visit us sometime. But for now, we'll settle for on video and leading our community. And I know that there's a few people watching now, but there's going to be more people watching this later. It'll be on our Instagram and Facebook site. But any last words from you, man?
Man, I would just say that, like, I think the last thing I'd say is like, if there's something about the gospel that offends you, then good, and the thing is that the gospel is supposed to push you and challenge you. And so I think the last thing that I have to say is, like, for my white brothers and sisters is this is a challenging time, which is kind of pushing the white community to step into understanding and engage in relationship with the Black community. And in my opinion, it's something that is gospel centered. I think the gospel wants us to understand each other. And so I would say this is, like, whether you accept the idea that there is white privilege or not, whether you have that makes your skin crawl, or whether you believe it's politicized or whatever else, there's nothing and no reason you can give me, right, that could convince me that stepping in a relationship is not something you still need to do. And so I think that's the thing, is it's like, start there. Start with a relationship. To the Black community, be ready, brace yourselves, right? And understand that there may be some offensive things that come. There may be some awkward conversations. You need to sit, have grace, and you need to have patience and engage with them. It's the only way we're going to heal it. Only way we'll heal our divide.
So good to hear their story, right? And not take it from something else that they've heard or what they think. But I love that. And you were very gracious too. You shared with me offline about some of the stuff that you encountered and stuff that you've experienced in high school, later, probably even up until this day. And I just want to say, man, my heart breaks for that, and breaks for you. And I'm sorry that of those experiences that you have had. And there's no but in that. But at the same time, it's like, God is using your voice, man. And it's incredible. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you for sharing your experiences and your stories, and how that's connecting to each and every person.
And I really appreciate you having me, man. And I'm grateful for you, and I'm grateful for your leadership and stepping into this conversation and inviting me. And I'm grateful for all the communities, the largely white communities that are doing that, in spite of the people that they're upsetting, because it's the pursuit of Jesus' heart, in my opinion. So I thank you. I really thank you for this conversation, and I look forward to actually, seeing you in the flesh one day as well.
Hey, Mike Mullenix is a common friend that we have, and he shot a story of you. I think it was just maybe a month into the COVID quarantine season, whatever we call it. But if you don't mind, we're gonna post that on our Facebook, and we'll post that on our Instagram, because we didn't even get into that, what God was doing in that season through your life as well.
Yeah.
But hey, Jalen, thanks again. I haven't received an email from you or an invite, but I don't hold that against you. I do have a saxophone. I have an alto sax, and I was 4th chair out of 4 in high school. Actually, I didn't make the high school band, but I don't want to talk about that. But if you ever are looking for a sexy saxophonist to do backup to your Nord, whatever that piano thing is that you have, you just let me know, bro. Like, I know the invitation's coming.
I got you. Yeah. I didn't think we could afford you. That's why I haven't sent the invite.
Bro, I know I said I was closing this up, but when did you start music, man? When did you start playing?
Man, I mean, I think I was probably like 6 or 7. My dad's a keys player, so I grew up with him, and I just sat at the piano next to him, and then as time went on, I just played. You know, that's kind of like how it is growing up in a small black church. It's like everybody does everything. So like my dad was a minister of music, trustee, and minister and deacon and or whatever. I don't know, man. But it's like he had to, if he wanted a break from something, he needed his son to play. So that's what happened. That's what happened.
That was so good.
So I've been playing since I was pretty young. Yeah. Hey, I play alto sax too. That's another instrument.
Oh man. I pulled my son, he was in the band. He's 12 now. He was in the band a couple of years ago and he wanted to play saxophone. So my saxophone, I think my dad brought it home to me and it was used. I think the last person that played that was in the 1800s. And then I gave it to my son. I opened it up. I was so proud to give it to him. And the reeds were still in there and they were green and black.
Oh God.
And I'm like, hey bud, that's just the color of them. I'm not going to go find more. You're going to have to play it. He got some disease, but he'll be all right.
That's where coronavirus started, man, was those reeds right there.
All right, buddy. You have a good day, man. Love you, man.
All right. Love you too. Thank you.
All right, bro.